All right, welcome everybody. As you're joining and taking a seat, you'll be placed in silence mode. So be sure to ask questions, however, in the Q&A section. And we like this to be a very interactive section. The program will be recorded and made available via email. If you also want to leverage the hashtag Canvas_IoT, we'll pull the questions into the Q&A. So again, if you want to leverage your favorite social media channel like Twitter or LinkedIn, we'll bring those questions in. I'm Lucian Fogoros, and I'd like to thank you for joining the Transform Your Operation with Power of AI in 60 Days, brought to you by IoT World and sponsored by Canvas AI. We have many registered attendees, over 850 of them, and a large part of this session is that it's live and it's an opportunity to engage with speakers. So as a catalyst for this, we'll be giving away 5 seats or to the Canvas AI Academy, as well as a 1-year membership to the VIP community of IoT World. So to enter the random drawing, feel free to engage with our speaker by posting your questions in the Q&A. I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Mr. Joe Wheelwright. He's a longtime tech journalist and board of advisors for IoT World. Joe, welcome.
Thank you, Lucian. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. And once again, thank you for joining us. Today, we have a topic that's on the minds of many people: how to use the power of AI to transform your operations. And with me today are Sachin Lula, Global Digital Strategy and Transformation Leader from EY, Michael Gardner from Manufacturing Industry Solutions at Microsoft, and Humera Malik, CEO at Canvas. Welcome to all of you. So in these presentations and Q&A today, we're going to discuss how to transform your operations with the power of AI in 60 days and create citizen data engineers across your workforce. So I'd like to kick off our session today by introducing Sachin Lula, Global Director of Strategy and Transformation Leader at EY. Sachin is principal in the consulting service line of Ernst & Young LLP and responsible for global digital strategy and transformation for advanced manufacturing and mobility clients. He also founded the Internet of Things practice in the Americas. Before joining EY, he spent 8 years at IBM, where he established the company's IoT services business in the Americas for industrial clients and also led the automotive industry P&L. He also spent 10 years at Deloitte in its manufacturing and aftermarket business. Take it away, Sachin.
Thank you, Jeff. And Lucian, Humera, and Michael, thank you for giving me this opportunity to kick off the session. This topic is near and dear to my heart, quite frankly. When we talk about AI, there's a lot of buzz around the potential of AI, but also in the media about AI replacing jobs and the fear AI has created. And I've been very, very passionate about talking on this topic and speaking about AI for good and tech for good more broadly. In fact, I've taught about AI at elementary schools around Florida, just to spread the message about AI for good. Before I jump into the topic of today, I just also, in the spirit of building a better working world, which is EY's mission, just today we've launched a global data challenge with data science and AI to all students to actually apply the power of AI to solve how wildfires can be managed. So we are actually encouraging students with free access to Microsoft Azure, including $10,000 in cash prizes to be won and mentorship from EY around the world to actually apply AI for good and transform the world. If you go to the next slide, Lucian, please. Again, consistent with the theme I've talked about as I engage on this topic of how do we leverage AI to drive and create business value. What's interesting to me is the strategy is very, very simple. It's AI, and I would rather use the word augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence, because I believe the purpose of AI and the purpose of technology is to amplify human potential and not replace them. And that's why I believe when you combine the power of AI with people, that's how you drive business value and transformation at scale. And I'm happy to give you more context on how we are approaching AI as we work with manufacturing clients globally in thinking about how they build their AI roadmaps, especially to drive operational efficiency and transform their operations. If you go to the next slide, Lucian, um, as we engage with manufacturing clients around the world, we often hear, the fundamental dilemma we are faced with is this idea of duality of growth. How do we transform the business of today with technologies like AI, unlock capital to then reinvest and drive a growth agenda for tomorrow, in the next and beyond? And the three themes that continue to come up, especially since we've been hit with this pandemic that has really put digital transformation in the driver's seat, is, number one, manufacturing companies are looking to put customer at the center of everything they do. As B2B companies now shifting to a B2B2C model, as consumers have adopted digital channels and really anticipate an Amazon-like experience with same-day deliveries for industrial products such as cars, just like they'd order a book from Amazon, has really put a lot of pressure on all of operations across manufacturing companies. This whole idea of resilient supply chains and building for not just in time, but just in case, with optionality and dual sourcing, applying AI to sense and respond to pandemics and global trade issues that we are faced with today. To then the third and the most interesting topic is, how do we scale digital? We've interviewed CEOs around the world, and 86% of the CEOs have said AI is essential to the success of their company. And what's interesting is, as we surveyed 500 plus leading manufacturing companies, which is the chart you see on the bottom right, what's interesting is only 30 of them have actually been able to scale AI and other emerging technologies to truly drive business value at scale. 400 of them are actually lagging behind and stuck in the world of pilot purgatory, which is a term we continue to hear when you talk about AI and other emerging technologies. And what's interesting is, with the huge focus on continuous improvement in manufacturing that we've seen over the years, companies have either taken a lean first approach by rolling out agile, Kaizen, and other initiatives across manufacturing globally, or taken a technology first approach to deploying technologies such as AI, IoT, machine learning, and other capabilities, but really have failed to drive continuous improvement. We believe that what separates the leaders from the laggards is taking a people first approach as they look to become a data driven company, by really giving their people the tools and the insights from the data that they have access to, by applying AI, machine learning, and other emerging technologies to drive business value at scale. So if we go to the next slide, Lucian, I think the question then becomes, why haven't we solved for this? As we engage with the C-suite across the board, what's fascinating to me is, when we bring up the topic of AI and digital, most CFOs will tell me, we are struggling. We haven't seen value from digital. We've invested millions in technology across ERP, across our operational environments, across engineering. Why are we not able to answer simple questions like, what's the true capacity that we have? How can we optimize that capacity more flexibly? to build products that maximize margin, and again, deliver custom orders, based on the promise dates we've committed to. How can we better respond to the disruption we are seeing? So the reality is, it's not that manufacturing hasn't invested in technology before. In fact, they have and invested a lot. What's happening is the investment has happened in silos across engineering, operational technologies, and IT. Lucian, if you don't mind clicking for me as we build on to this theme, once more, please. As manufacturing companies are designing and engineering connected products, they've implemented in a variety of technologies and platforms. They've done the same on the OT side. And now with the big push on cloud and edge, with a big focus on security and bringing IT, OT, ET together, there's a big push from the CIO on rolling out IT solutions. And then if you click again, what's interesting is if you talk to the CFO, CEO, and now digital transformation really becoming a mandate from the board, if you click again, Lucian, thank you. As companies like us engage with the board and educate them on the topic of AI and digital, if you click again, with the disconnects that they've seen across ET, IT, and OT and the investments they've made in silos, now combined with AI, machine learning, IoT, 3D printing, all of these acronyms is really put a lot of pressure on manufacturing companies to really think about where and how they get started to drive value at scale. If you go to the next slide, Lucian, please. What we are seeing is that AI is actually ready. We've actually deployed AI and machine learning use cases across our clients globally, both on the process side and discrete side. And we truly believe AI, when combined with other digital technologies and standard ways of working, will drive and enable zero-touch operations and zero defects. So it's really how you combine capabilities that AI offers with the right cloud-enabled, purpose-built platforms, as well as the right digital infrastructure with the physical automation required in the manufacturing environment of today to go after the zero defect, zero touch, autonomous operations vision that we have. But what's interesting is if you go to the next slide, Lucian, is what we are seeing is, next slide, please, thank you, is that the reality is, as manufacturing companies have invested in these silos and have grown through M&A, the legacy debt that they carry has really limited them in at least how they think about accelerating their transformation journey with Industry 4.0 and applying digital technologies at scale. There's clearly value, like I said, with capabilities we have built in a solution called EY Smart Factory. We are actually deploying a lot of AI machine learning use cases across maintenance, across quality, across planning, across digital twins, supply chain control towers, all the words a lot of us are very familiar with. But there are four things that are absolutely critical when you think about starting your digital transformation journey enabled by AI. The first mistake I feel most companies are making is they're jumping into experimentation without really having a clear vision and a roadmap tied to a business case to define the why. Why are we doing what we are doing, and what value do we plan to unlock as we deploy capabilities like AI across the enterprise? Second is, once using the ROI lens, you've got all the stakeholders aligned. At the end of the day, data quality is going to make or break your AI journey. So investing upfront on a holistic approach to data engineering, data quality, is absolutely very, very critical as you then look at your roadmap to have a deeper understanding of what data you need to truly deploy those use cases at scale. The third thing, which is critical, is the platform. And again, it's very important that you think about platforms, both from a cloud and edge and an AI perspective, as purpose-built industrial-grade platforms that will not only accelerate your journey because they've thought through these use cases before, built a data dictionary of how you actually enable those use cases at scale, but they also can do that on a global scale and give you the security that is absolutely fundamental as you connect the manufacturing shop floor to the cloud. In fact, just last week, there was um, a news headline that said the packaging giant Westrock had a ransomware attack that halted production. So again, it's important you pick the right purpose-built platform that is secure as you start your journey. And then the fourth and the most important thing, which is where I started, if you click to the next slide, Lucian, is the people. Starting on an AI journey is all about putting people at the center of your transformation, because as you leverage the data that you have to turn that into insights, what we call smart equipment, in the end, it is the people that will make decisions based on that data and take action. Data without insights is irrelevant. Insights without somebody acting on them are actually useless, which is why we believe people are at the center of driving transformations with AI at scale as you create a high performance culture and become a data-driven company. So hopefully this was helpful. Jeff, back to you so my counterparts can actually further provide more context on some of the points I've raised.
Thank you, Sachin. Very thought-provoking, particularly the last point, well, actually the entire theme about putting people at the center of this change. So next we have Michael Gardner, who leads Microsoft's digital transformation initiatives in the Canadian manufacturing industry. In his current role, Michael provides guidance on Industry 4.0 and helps manufacturers enhance engineering and production processes using industrial IoT, intelligent cloud and edge computing, and AI. It's all yours, Michael.
Thanks. Can get to our first slide. So yeah, I'm very, very happy to be there. I'm honored to participate on this panel with such esteemed colleagues. So I represent the manufacturing industry for Microsoft in Canada. I'm actually a mechanical engineer who spent over 20 years implementing product lifecycle management systems and digital manufacturing systems with companies of all shapes and sizes. So it's a very challenging time right now, but if we move on to the next slide, I can kind of outline what's happening and what we're seeing at Microsoft in the world of manufacturing. And the first thing is that there's a ton of innovation that's occurring. You know, the idea of Industry 4 was officially coined in 2012, but work in the space has happened far before that term was called. And if you kind of extend the build, you know, what we're doing certainly is investing heavily in cloud computing, which is one of the key technology platforms of Industry 4.0. But equally important is the idea of the IoT and edge, because obviously manufacturers, if you keep advancing the build, we can just kind of get to that. You know, manufacturers have been collecting data for a long period of time, but the challenge when transitioning to new technologies and leveraging it in things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, is accessing that information, right? So we have production systems that are in place and working really well, but we want to add flexibility. And the key thing about Industry 4 as a business, it's really about meeting individual customer needs at scale. But that really forces a rethink on kind of classic manufacturing systems and business models. And so, you know, we think about this all the time at Microsoft, how we can support this journey, and we're certainly investing there. And so let's go to the next slide. So one of the key aspects of Industry 4, if we build it out, is the idea of feedback or closed loop feedback. So we've always been in a mechanism or a mode where we seek input from the market or customers, and we try to build that into our products and services. Similarly, on the shop floor and operations, we're looking for insights into what's happening in production, what's happening at an individual machine or work cell. We want to know also how our products are performing, right? And finally, the most important aspect that Sachin touched on is the people aspect of it, the employees. You know, the classic Toyota production system relies on thinking, right, of the people who are closest to the problem. And so if we capture that feedback faster and more efficiently, then we are able to innovate and, more importantly, increase revenue, find new opportunities, either cost savings on the shop floor, new customer interests, better products and services, and better support of our employees. So why don't we build out to the next slide? So here's an example of doing this really fast. So at Microsoft, we're heavily involved in the security business. It is an imperative that our security is threat-proof and as robust as it can be. We spend over $1 billion on security R&D every year on top of operations. And what we're doing is we're actually scanning everyone across our footprint. We're scanning about 6.5 trillion threat signals every day, right?
Michael, you're on mute.
As well as authentications across the footprint. And what can happen is if we spot an anomaly or a new threat, we can actually shut it down across our entire landscape of customers using our advanced threat protection. So here's an idea where we not only see things very quickly across a very big footprint, but we're also automating the response so other people are protected, right? So this is the power of AI, and this is the power of closing the loop extremely fast, right? This is happening in 0-day attacks, you know, and so forth. And so if we go to the next slide, you know, this type of thinking, you know, if you looked at our position in security and enterprise security, you know, a decade ago, it's very different now. We're a leader across the Magic Quadrant because the information we're collecting, the behavior, we're not downloading, you know, virus profiles to PCs on an everyday basis like we were, right? We're seeing these instantaneously, right? And so this is the type of thinking you can see, you know, what it's done for our own business. Let's go to the next slide. Similarly, we are extending this thinking to the industrial landscape. So, you know, I spoke primarily on IT security, but for this community, for people involved in industrial, there's another side of operations that, you know, often isn't spoken about as or treated by IT as intensely, but it's equally important, and that's the OT landscape. And so operational technology, industrial networks, there's been all sorts of attacks and certainly an increase in that over the years, especially now that most industrial networks aren't truly air gapped, right? It used to be we ran our industrial network separate from our IT network, but what's happened now is you're seeing increased connectivity. And a lot of times the challenge is that if you're working on a production system, there's always people tweaking things. You know, you're working with line builders or subcontractors who might be in your network, right? And they're not necessarily doing bad things, but the fact is there's a lot of change that isn't monitored. And so we acquired a leading firm in June in this space called CyberX that had been spending a lot of time in this area for over 20 years. And what we're doing is they have a way to do agentless monitoring, so continuous monitoring of industrial networks. So it doesn't interfere with network traffic. It's completely passive. However, we can, and even if you've segmented your networks properly, we can actually scan and see what's happening in the industrial network, right? It understands industrial protocols. And the reason that's important is because now you have the ability to have complete visibility on what's happening in an industrial network, right? Be it, and you can even use that thinking to spot anomalies. For example, if a PLC is configured incorrectly, right, and there's a different traffic pattern, we can spot that because we're using the same thinking. We're using artificial intelligence. We're learning from the standard behavior of the industrial network, and then when there's anomalies, we instantaneously alert people. The other side of that is investment in our IoT platform. So a couple of years ago, we talked about how we're investing $5 billion in Azure IoT. So we are informed by our participation in places like the Industrial and Internet Consortium and other industry groups, but we're having an industry-leading position because we look at IoT not just from a consumer perspective, but from a security perspective from day one. We publish white papers on the 7 properties of a secure IoT system. And the other thing that we're doing is we're making it a lot more accessible, because typically what was happening in the past is that it would take a lot of time to get machines connected, to set up industrial systems. With Azure IoT and some of the ideas like plug and play, we're making that process a lot faster. So the net result of that is you can have security that is much more robust than you've ever had in the past, but you can also implement new systems much faster and much more industrial strength. And we don't necessarily rely just on an internet connection, because all of this is based on a hybrid architecture that includes edge computing, which is really important in industrial because obviously you want computing where it makes the most sense, and high-speed processes, you need local computing, as well as not every factory or site is connected to the internet 24/7 by high bandwidth. So that's all factored in along with security. And what that means is that this digital journey that companies are going on is much more accessible, whether you're a large global multinational or whether you're a small manufacturing startup. Let's go to the next slide. So I think there's a poll happening here. I don't know if we want to talk about that, but we'll advance to the next slide. So when we look at manufacturing and the framework at Microsoft, we look at these 5 main areas that we see digital transformation occurring. Obviously, in workforce transformation, it starts with people, it ends with people. And so helping them, especially in this time, in terms of increased safety, we have much more complexity in our shop floors. So training and assistance, mixed reality is very popular. Engaging customers is important. We need to find new ways to give them a better experience, especially as it's more personalized. Our factories need to be much more agile. We need to be able to produce in smaller batches and much more personalized runs or personalized products. Gone are the days, or it's changing the days where Henry Ford, you can have anything as long as it's black. That is not the case anymore, and there'll be a day where every single cell phone that is produced will be individualized to a specific consumer, produced very quickly, shipped to you very quickly. Supply chain, certainly a big challenge of the last year. And then finally, the idea of unlocking innovation and delivering new services. And Humera is going to talk a lot about innovation and what she's doing, but it touches on a few different areas here. So finally, if we, at the end of the day, the work that's being done by us and our huge ecosystem of partners, companies like Canvas, companies like UI, are really advancing digitalization of manufacturing. So, I'm seeing it in Canada and North America, and certainly my peers in the manufacturing industry group at Microsoft are really active pushing the envelope, and it's picking up speed, that's for sure. So the last slide, and just to close out, at Microsoft, our mission is to empower every person in every organization to achieve more. As you can see what we're doing a lot in this space with our partners. We help build the platform, but they're building solutions. They have the domain experience that's applying AI to things like industrial operations and so forth. And so excited to share what we're doing to try and help make that possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. Some amazing data there on how digitalization in manufacturing is accelerating. And now I'm going to turn to our final presenter, Humera Malik, CEO of Canvas AI, a software provider that empowers the world's largest industrial companies with actionable intelligence to make data-driven operational decisions, and the sponsor of today's event. Internationally, Ms. Malik is one of the leading voices on artificial intelligence and how it can help the industrial sector to propel growth. Humera, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jeffrey. I think before we get into this, there was another poll that Lucien was going to run. So while I start this, I'd appreciate if everybody can respond to the poll, because it's important to understand some of the things that Michael and Sachin touched on. But we also want to understand from your perspective, the audience perspective, some of your key priorities and how you're leveraging this data today. So as we go through this poll, I will start. So some really, I think some really great points that that Sachin and Michael made. Make it easy for me to start with the intro here, because they touched on all of the things for which we actually purpose-built the Canvas AI platform. So I'm Humaira Malik. I'm a software engineer by trade, have had the opportunity to work from the telecom into the IoT and the industrial IoT sector, and have learned that over this transition, that data is nothing new that we're working with. We've all just realized the value of the data more and more. So that's really where we have built Canvas AI platform, which is really a purpose-built software platform sitting in Microsoft Azure cloud and leveraging all of the key capabilities that Microsoft offers in the manufacturing sector and enabling and empowering the manufacturing sector so that the power of data can be used by the people themselves. And that's what Sachin started with, really, is putting people first. And so our purpose built, why we call it so purpose built, and it's a unified AI platform, it's because it's purpose built for empowering the process engineers on the plant floor, the reliability engineers, the maintenance guys, people that have the data, but data has been hoarded into places where it's a black box and they don't have the ability to touch it. That's really what we're enabling, is we have created the software interface that allows the subject matter experts and our partners that work with data to connect the real people that can use the impact of the data to connect and use our interface into the plant floors so they can start to work with their data. Most of these, as some of you who have come from that background might know, tribal knowledge and intuition has been a lot more prevalent and like a lot more used than the power of data. And so we're basically now, we call it somewhat of a disruptive approach, but I would say is that's very important, is because a lot of this 30 to 40% of this workforce that's in the industrial sector, especially in certain industries, is an aging workforce. And the next generation of workforce that's coming in, it is very digitized and they know how to use the power of data with the click of a button. And that's kind of what we're empowering, is allowing people to get more empowered and use their data for decision making. We've been fortunate to work with some of the world's largest brands, have found that not everybody is at the same level of the journey, but it's important to get started somewhere. And I was seeing some of the questions come in the chat as well. It's never too good to wait for the perfect place, but actually to get started now and see where you are. That's very important to understand, because if you don't know where you are and you put an AI roadmap and you want to automate and optimize, you won't get there. So it's very important to first baseline where you are and start using it in places where you have complex operations and data can be used to understand. Learn before you start to run. So it's important to start to walk and learn how you are going to get to the optimization phase. Moving on to the next slide. The impact part is very important. I saw in one of the questions that came up is the roadmap for AI. What we got to realize is, first is understanding the meaning of your data, what it means for you today, but creating an impact is important, but impact does not happen day one. So this is the kind of impact that we have seen working with some of these large manufacturing companies around, is some of them have gained some small benefits where they have optimized their cogeneration assets and they're gaining benefits of a few $100,000 every year. But what that has done for them is, because they have used a software-centric approach, they're able to apply it across the board, across all of their assets now. So something that Michael and Sachin were touching on, why the platform-centric approach is because now they can take it from one place and apply it across the 50 different facilities that they have. And that's really why the platform scalable approach, what I call it, it's a rinse and repeat approach, is important. The other part is also knowledge transfer, is where you have done it once, if you continue to build it in a siloed way and you're not using a platform approach, you can't scale it. You can't rinse and repeat it. Then in certain industries where we have actually worked, in automotive industry, there is a lot of work still being done manually in terms of inspections. And this is really where a little bit of an automation where you can start using AI and machine learning can help save hundreds of thousands of dollars on a weekly basis. And that's the kind of impact that we have seen one of our customers realize. Some of the very complex operations like metals manufacturing, that every fraction of a change that can keep the process running smoothly with less variability impacts it by hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in just one of the chemical processes where one of our customers actually used this to keep the process variability at the lowest, is able to save over $6 million in a year. That's the kind of impact. But this impact doesn't come overnight, as I said. You first start to understand what's going on in your process. And that's really where sometimes there's a myth about AI, is people don't understand is where to get started and how to get started. And that's very important, that it's not, AI is not the ultimate goal. AI can and be a starting point for you to help you understand about your operations. If you move to the next slide here. So as I said, we are working towards building that purposeful approach, remove the silos, augment the workforce, allow them the ability to work with their own data. And this, you hear a lot about now, digitizing the workforce and creating citizen data engineers. This is really why platforms like ours exist. So if you go to the next slide, Lucian. Augmenting the workforce is the most important thing, because even though you see a lot of demand for data science increase, the world would never have enough data scientists that can support the manufacturers and the needs for the industrials. And the other is the data scientists don't bring the subject matter expertise that are required. So that collaboration between tying the knowledge of the data and the knowledge of the process or the operation has been the key. So even though today you would see in some of the places where people are bringing in data scientists, what Sachin referred to as the POC purgatory, that happens is because we bring in data scientists, they don't necessarily have the knowledge of the subject matter experts. And when you throw data over to people to work with it, that approach never works. And that's really where 70% of these kind of projects fail. And in AI, what's become really key now is to start to take this platform approach, because these people on the plant floors necessarily don't have coding skills. They certainly have all of the skills that are required to run the complex operations on the plant floor, but not the coding skills. So this is really where software platform approach is important, and self-serving AI capabilities that allow people to feel and touch and feel the AI part, not make it a myth where people can't even touch it and use it to their benefit. And so augmenting of the workforce is important in many ways, as I said, not just because of the workforce gap that's coming up in the next decade, but also because it's a very competitive environment. And if you can control a fraction of the cost of your raw material, if you can control the cost of the energy utilization, if you can control from a future perspective the output and the yield, that gives you the power, that gives you the competitive advantage. And so those are some of the things, as we saw some of the poll numbers that I saw earlier, profitability and sustainability. Profitability, because now you can reduce waste. You can look at improving the quality of the product by just controlling simple things. I have seen where a very large customer of ours was able to control the variation of the moisture in their food products, and able to actually increase the quality of their product and improve the shelf life. Those are the kind of simple things that we always not think about applying AI, but those are the kind of things that start to impact profitability. And we won't have enough time to talk all about sustainability, but certainly on top of mind for most of our customers. Moving to the next slide here. Just talking a little bit about traditional versus digital industrial engineer. The traditional engineers really have had the intuition and the tribal knowledge that they have been working with. We were working, to give you an example, in one of the cases, we heard somebody who's been working on the same process, and it's simple things like a fermentation process for the past 30 years and have always been running it in a certain way. It's a batch process, always run it for X number of hours. But when you start to look at the data, you can actually start to reduce anywhere from 10 to 30% of that time and start to optimize the assets. And that contributes to hundreds of thousands of dollars of savings on a regular basis. And that actually means a lot because we're all operating on laser thin margins. So it's really augmenting that workforce that allows you to change that perspective that you've been using for decades, is what we call the transition from a traditional industrial engineer who always knew to run it at that same time, at the same levels, but now actually changing them towards a digital industrial engineer that can make those kind of data-driven decisions. So if you go to the next slide, Lucian, I'll speak to a couple of case studies because I know everybody's very keen to understand, but there's a whole lot of them, and we're happy to share more afterwards as well. But this is one of a very large Fortune 2000 manufacturer who really was looking to look at how to reduce the dependency on outside parties that come in and work with their data, walk away with the knowledge from their data. And their people in the end did not necessarily have the knowledge or the power to apply that in their operations. And when they changed that approach, when they started to put the people first and the operations at the back, their entire operation now has changed. And people have performance-based incentives built into them because now every engineer is motivated to create a change. And through that, they have been able to basically improve on their productivity. And that's really, sometimes it's just removing some of the manual analysis. People can only take analysis to a certain point where you can do analysis of 100 data points or 500 data points. But when you have them coming at a higher frequency and higher volume, that's where you start to use these kind of tools that usually are really a mystery for people. They don't know how to use it. That's really where they started to use our platform. So they could start to do the analysis. Instead of spending 3 days, they could do it in 3 hours. And when they started to apply that knowledge and create the impact, just by improving the quality of the yield, by actually applying AI-based applications that we have in our platform, they were able to understand and simulate, instead of doing lab tests, understand what was going on and apply forecast and to see what their yield would be. And that way the engineers were able to go in, make those tweaks well in advance. I need to change the temperature settings. I need to change some settings on my raw material. And they've gained benefit of millions of dollars of savings, as well as actually better profitability on their side. And at the end, the byproduct always is sustainability. Reduce waste, reduce carbon emission. And so sustainability always is the byproduct. People don't think about it first, but afterwards you realize that actually everything that you do in these kind of scenarios is contributing to sustainability. If you go to the next one, this is just quickly, I know some of the people might also be in the audience from some of the partners that we work with. One of our partners who actually works in Asia with a very large energy facility that produces about 65% of the energy in the Philippines market. They basically were looking to become a trusted advisor and a partner of their customer, who they help to hoard a lot of data in different systems. But in order to extract the value, they were looking to see how they can help this customer. And how they were able to do it is by leveraging the power of our AI platform. They were able to extract that data from all of their infrastructure of data and actually predict for them any times their wellhead failure would happen well in advance. They got to a point where now exactly precisely 4.5 hours earlier, they can predict when the engineer needs to go shut it down so that it doesn't consume the energy for the production cycles. And through that, obviously, again, as I said, byproduct is always sustainability, but actually being able to save hundreds and thousands of dollars of energy costs without any production was a key ROI for them. So in the end, if I move on to the next slide, the next one, please, Lucien. In the end, we talked about, a 60-day transformation plan. That really is for for anybody here to understand, it's not a 5-year process for you to start to leverage AI, but you can get started with using the power of AI in your operations on day one. If you actually plan it right, you start to look at first, not just necessarily the outcome from AI, but actually starting to measure in small bits the impact of using your data. Forget about the technology, forget it's AI or it's quantum physics embedded. Don't look at it that way. Look at where I'm looking to either create efficiencies, better, it could be better yield, better quality. Where am I looking to create more automation so my people are not continuously doing manual work, but I'm actually augmenting my workforce? So look at the business objective instead of a technology objective. And the technology then comes in and empowers you to achieve that business objective. And that's how we think about the 0 to 60-day journey, is first to have an understanding of your data. Then go in, understand and understand the value of their data by leveraging the intelligent insights capabilities that we have. From there, start to use the pre-built applications and templates that we have in a workflow that allows you to first look at anomalies within your operations. I do some simulation instead of constantly doing manual measuring through lab tests, and then get towards forecasting, and then gets towards optimization. So you leverage those kind of workflows. Then from there, go out and deploy. Don't be scared. Even if some things from an AI machine learning perspective are not performing at 110% performance levels, don't be scared, because it's an iterative process. The more you learn, the more learning you apply in your operations. And that's where I'll go back to what Sechin said. AI and humans will work together. AI will only provide you better insights so that you can leverage to actually increase your performance and the performance of your operations. And with that, I think we'll take a pause. And I think moving on here, I'll pass it on to Jeffrey to open this up for any questions. You're on mute, Jeffrey.
Thank you. Thanks again, Humera. So much in that to unpack. Wow. It's, so now it's going to be time to transition to the Q&A portion of today's session, where we're going to entertain the myriad of questions. I've seen a lot of questions coming in. And as a reminder, we have 2 options for submitting questions that you can use. So there's the Zoom Q&A tool, or you can submit them via Twitter using the Canvas, that's with 2 S's, _IIOT. And to answer the first question that I've seen a lot of people ask, the content from today's session will be made available after the conclusion of the virtual conference. And in the event time doesn't permit us to get through all of the questions, we'll carry the conversation over to social media and address them there via Twitter, once again, using that same hashtag, Canvas with 2 S's _IIOT. So the first question is really about getting started. And we've seen that from a number of people, and they want to know, well, how do I get started bringing in my senior management? How do I involve IT or business intelligence? And do they need to be involved? So maybe we can start with you, Humera, on that question.
Sure, Jeffrey. Yes, we get asked that question all the time. And it's really not, I think something that Michael was talking about, it's not really a siloed decision. The organization has to be involved from an IT, OT, and management perspective. Usually these kind of initiatives are driven from an OT or IT perspective, but it's important to start with what the business impact and the business outcome is. Technology, as I always say, even though we are an AI embedded platform, technology is secondary to it. First is determine what is the business objective. I'm trying to remove manual intervention of humans during this manual process because I could be doing better things than then constantly looking at it, say, good, bad, right? So how do we actually look at some of those low-hanging problem statements where you can start to use data, because you still collect data about most of these things. We sometimes don't know about it. So start with those areas. I would say I'd leave everybody with this. Don't start with the most complex place. Start with simple places where you have data, you have the ability to show impact. And that's where if you're trying to drive that change, your executives and your management would buy in too. But if you start with the most complex ones, and you don't have necessarily all the data, and it's so complex that you can't even break it down, that's really where we see most of these projects don't go through.
Thanks, Humira. Do you want to jump in, Michael or Sachin?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would echo Humira's comments. I mean, it's important to look at the business problem you're trying to solve. The key thing is, though, a lot of times you can apply it to problems you're solving every day, like in manufacturing, process control, or yield optimization. These are common problems, except now there's different ways to address them, right? You probably have a lot of data on your production line if you're operating machinery and so forth. It might be in a database next to the machine, but that's fine, right? With the technology that's available now, that's easily extracted or utilized in this type of machine learning. But fundamentally, it comes down to, you know, what's the problem from a business perspective that I'm trying to solve, rather than kind of say, I have AI and machine learning, let's look for things to do with it, right?
Yeah, and Sachin, you talked about people being at the center of it. I would imagine one of the challenges here is around engagement, around getting people to understand the value of it, and particularly on the front lines, for example, where they can use a platform that is no code to say, okay, well, this matters to me and it's going to make a difference to my job. So do you have any tips on that?
Yeah, Jeff. I think that is the key. Is you need to co-create the answer with the people on the front lines to truly get the buy-in on, implementing a solution like AI, or for that matter, any emerging technology. Which is why I think where Michael was going is, it's very important to first identify what's the business problem you're trying to solve for. What we've done is we've created an approach where we actually work with end users to identify their pain points, prioritize them, understand the business impact each of those pain points is having, what the root cause is, and then decide how to go solve for it. The other interesting approach, as we were talking about the previous question, is, how do you get started? Quite frankly, it can be a top-down push, like I said, as most boards are now mandating some form of formal efforts around digital transformation. In some companies, this is not a high priority yet, given what they're grappling with, especially during the current pandemic. What we've seen is a bottoms-up approach, as simple as people having lunch and learn sessions to bring a community of people together to talk about problems they're facing, bring in external speakers, and start to drive a bottoms-up movement to adopt and drive some of these innovative solutions into the company. And it's been fascinating to see some do this really well, while others really requiring that top-down executive sponsorship to really make this a more formal program. So hopefully some of those thoughts help, but in the end, like you said, the more the end users are engaged in both identifying the problem we're going to solve and then defining the solution, the more we will have buy-in and stickiness for adopting digital technologies like AI.
Great, thank you for that. That's actually a good lead into the next question. And maybe we'll start with you again, Humira, on this one. So give us an example of an AI failure and what you learned from it.
An AI failure really happens, and now I have a couple of things in a couple of places in mind. AI failure happens when you try to put the technology first. So when the initiatives are led by, hey, we're going to do AI project, and then they have tried to fit the square peg into that round hole where data wasn't consistent. So putting a laptop there next to your operation and collecting random data for a month, and then trying to apply AI because your boss told you this time that you have to actually apply an AI case and show me. Yeah. That's really where I've seen AI fail. Just in the interest of time, I'm making it very short, but that really what it is is being able to apply it in a place where you're not ready to apply it, but you're using AI as a project, not I'm looking to improve this manual inspection process that I'm doing. I have several examples of that, but really that's the core of where we have seen AI fail.
Yeah, Yumera, you brought up a memory for me. This is a few years back, but we were asked to come in to this $100 billion chemicals company to look at a process optimization scenario and apply an AI neural network model to do process optimization. What was happening is they had a huge quality problem. I mean, typically in the process environment, uh, they send batches to the lab to determine if it's good quality or bad quality. And you only find out days after the lab results come back. In this case, they were continuing to have a lot of recalls on their sheets. They made sheets for countertops that are actually market leading, but with quality problems. At the end of the line, they had an operator that basically manually said good sheet or bad sheet, good sheet or bad sheet. Heavily automated environment. So we were asked, hey, we've got all the data that you need to help us implement an AI solution for inline quality so you can predict a quality issue before it happens. What was interesting is based on the data that they had, while we were able to predict a good sheet or bad sheet very accurately, because the operators never collected any detailed level data on the defect category, is it a color defect or a gauge defect? And then how can we actually solve it? Just identifying the problem is not good enough. So we had to actually put in some process improvements in place to collect data at the right level and standardize that process across all sites and build some historical data before we could even train the model to be that accurate to get to the root cause of why it would be a good sheet or bad sheet, and then how do you actually resolve it. So I think to your point, it comes back to starting with the end in mind, making sure you have data, not just um, sufficient data, but data at the right level of detail to train the model so you can actually predict and actually be prescriptive about some of these quality problems. So it was an interesting 6 to 8 week journey with the client. Like I said, in the end, we ended up applying visual inspection at the end of the line to at least automate that process, but then with the process improvements, started to collect data at the right level. So you brought up a good memory for me, which I thought I would share.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And in interest of time, I've got a couple of questions here, which I'm going to combine. So a number of you have kind of brought up this notion of, well, you need to kind of start in the right place. So how do we evaluate which projects to get started with? And what are some of the requirements for a successful 60-day transformation, as you spoke about, Humera? So maybe we could start with you on that.
That's really looking at each individual entity separately, because how we start to look at is we actually measure everybody on a scale of a digital journey, and from a 1 to 10 where you are with your digital journey. Obviously from somebody's on the left hand side is they're early in their journey, then it's better to start working with some very simple kind of tools and analysis where you might be looking for simple analytics. You might be looking at trends and patterns that can help you actually understand your operations. Then somebody who comes in the middle of the scale, which is anybody who's built some infrastructure, some ability to collect data consistently, then they would be able to apply some more advanced technologies, AI, machine learning, and others, where they can start to now look at beyond just the trends and the patterns that they have been looking at and start to say, okay, where are places where we can start to now create some of the controls, drive that meaningful value from the data and create some controls that could just be, as I said, the most simple things where we always have in our library of places where, or use cases where people start is really looking at energy utilization and improving some of the asset utilization. That's really some of the very, I would say, is the low-hanging fruit of opportunity where people can get started. And then obviously the measurements are the same as we said before. Do you have the data? Do you know what is the business outcome you're looking to achieve from that? So having that is important. And then on the right-hand side of the scale, it's a more mature company where obviously they have built an infrastructure of data collection. They have built several technologies internally and externally, and they would have some of the analytics and transformation teams internally. They go about doing it differently. So that's kind of at the highest of the level. That's how you start, is first map yourself where you are, and then start to apply some of the technologies based on where you are in that digital scale, and then leverage some of the advanced technologies to start to control some of the things that you were doing before in a non-data way, which is I know how to, I put my hand on the compressor and I know when this is going to fail. How do you get away from that and start to use your own data to basically tell you how to do that? That's how I would say is you would frame the starting point.
That's great. Thank you for that. Michael, I'm going to turn to you because we have a question about cloud and manufacturing. So what are the most common misconceptions you're seeing about cloud and manufacturing?
Well, I'd say that probably the number one is you need to have an internet connection 24/7 and super reliable for it to work, right? And so, like I said in my presentation, and especially around IoT, fault tolerance running at the edge is vital to applying the cloud in manufacturing. And that's our default architecture. That is how Azure has always been constructed from the beginning, and then the IoT capabilities add on top of that. The second thing is around security. There is fear about cloud security compared to maybe on-premise systems, but if you look at most of the cyber attacks that are occurring, actually it's on-premise systems that are much more vulnerable. And especially in certain manufacturing systems, you might have older software because that's what that industrial software needed to operate this machine or instrumentation. So you leave yourself open to that. And so that's why we have obviously an approach that is very robust and proven in industry, and we're constantly investigating new ways to make it even more and more powerful. And the key thing is it has to be real time, right? Networks are being more connected, and that's important to improve productivity and to realize the dream of Industry 4 or start to apply things like machine learning. But we understand it has to be secure, and we're working really hard to make sure it stays that way.
Great, thank you for that. And this will probably be the last question given the time here. But do remember that we'll look to answer any remaining questions on social media. So this one, maybe you could kick it off, Humera. It's about proof of concepts. And there are lots of proof of concepts out there, but how do you ensure that you go beyond a single proof of concept and show value across the entire organization and get people to adopt this as a new tool and use it often?
Thanks, Jeffrey, for that question. Well, so proof of concept don't exist in my world. I think proof of concepts are when people are trying to do research projects, they should go partner with universities and research institutions to do proof of concepts. But if you're looking to actually look at doing some trials and looking at learning, then I would always say is start at a couple of places instead of one place, because your learning would be different from those. And that's how we actually, we have built roadmaps with our customers, is start working from understanding your data, driving meaning from it, and then driving impact from it. So don't ever look at just doing a place. Maybe you can look at a couple of places. Maybe you can look at a couple of operations. It could be 2 different facilities. But because if you just put all the eggs into that one basket, you might not have any learning. So always start with a couple of places, but don't start to boil the ocean either. But go with that approach. The one most important thing, which we've been talking about, is the people side. Always make sure that the people that are going to be involved in it have this on their priority, because everybody in the manufacturing on the real plant floors are in a firefighting mode the whole time. And how do they prioritize these kind of things, which in everybody's mind, at the back of my mind, they're thinking nice to have, even though we have seen that it is critical to have now, because intuition and tribal knowledge would only get us so far. So it is really important to make sure that you provide that priority and the dedicated support if you're doing anything. Otherwise, whoever you're doing it with, they might learn from your operations and walk away. You might not have any learning. And that's not just me saying it, it's actually proved by the numbers. That's where 70% of these kind of projects fail. So it's important to have that, I think. And the third is, it's all about learning how to walk before you run. Do not go for the most complex things. So start from a couple of places, keep it very focused, prioritize on who the people are from the plant floor and the operations and the IT and whoever else, is make sure they have the time and that it is a priority on their agenda. And then work with, it doesn't provide impact overnight, but work with the fact that you're going to learn and you're going to improve, and that would be your starting point.
Great, thank you for that. And Sachin and Michael, I'll turn to you for any final thoughts on that.
Maybe I'll go. I agree with you, Mara. I think it's important that like this is happening, right? And so you do want to select a few different projects where you're going to maximize learning, right? Don't be married too much to an individual outcome, because what you may learn is that you're not fully prepared and you need to do some work there, right? And it is important. Like, this is a journey, it's a digital journey, and some companies are further ahead than others. So if you have a few different projects or opportunities, look at those, and as well as, be prepared that things aren't always going to work, or there might be some gaps in the setup. Sachin indicated instrumentation and data collection, but also don't realize that, like, some of the old problems with data collection where it take, weeks or months to get a machine. We work with partners where a partner walked in the door and connected a machine and was streaming data within 30 minutes. So that's what our platforms are doing in terms of making things accessible. And for smaller businesses, it means that they can also participate in this game, because the cost has come way down, the time has come way down, the technology is much more accessible, and there is a lot of ecosystems of partners like Canvas and Ernst & Young to get things going.
Great. Any final thoughts, Sachin?
Yeah, all I'll add is, again, I think Yumera and Michael have already shared some great nuggets. As we look at a methodology where you plan value, prove value, and scale value as you apply AI and other technologies to use cases, like I said, I think it's very important that you spend some time up front to plan which use cases you're going to go after. Then in the prove value space, like both Yumera and Michael said, it's important to have some level of experimentation. Not every use case is going to be successful. That's okay. But instead of doing a POC, make it a pilot. Engage the users from the very beginning. Use real data and pilot it at a real site with a real use case in mind. And once you prove out the use case, go back and update the business case you created in the plan value phase. That's why we call it benefit realization. That starts in the plan value phase, but goes into prove. And again, you fail fast, move on to the next one. But if you prove out a use case at one site, then you accelerate the deployment of that use case to all sites across your network to, again, move from prove value to scale value very, very quickly, while you continue to prove out the other use cases. So, I've seen some clients invest in what they call lighthouse factories, where they'll try to prove out and deploy 50 use cases for one site. Our experience has been taking one use case, proving it, and then deploying it across all sites is the best way to scale value much faster, while you continue to prove value across a variety of use cases. So hopefully that adds a little more context, at least from our experience.
Thank you for that, Sachin. And thank you all for a fantastic session this morning. It's been really insightful, and I've very much enjoyed it. And I'm sure everyone else did too. And so, Lucian, I am going to throw it to you to take us out.
All right, thank you, everybody. So just wanted to thank everybody for their time. and joining us. The 5 winners for the Canvas AI Academy will be announced tomorrow at 11:30. So you don't have to be present. We'll be doing a LinkedIn live session, taking some of the snippets of today's presentation and post it on LinkedIn. And right at the end of that session, we'll announce the 5 winners, as well as the winner of the most active, if you will, or from the pool of most active users in the Q&A. Appreciate all the questions that you've sent. Also want to remind that we have a series of events focused on manufacturing and AI in manufacturing. So you could see a number of the speakers will be present on next week on March 18 on IoT World's Manufacturing Day. You can find more information on iot-world.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, Canvas AI, for this educational session, and to our speakers, Sachin, Michael, Humera, and our moderator, Jove. You can also find them on Clubhouse. I know there is a Tech Business Disrupt, there is AI in manufacturing. Feel free to join that. If you need an invitation, reach out to us, and happy to facilitate that. If you have a suggestion for a topic or otherwise, we always welcome feedback. So please drop us a message and let us know. If you like what you've heard today, we invite you to subscribe to our newsletter or YouTube channels, or follow us on Twitter. This concludes the program for today.